Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
now
you're ready to deal
now
with
I'm ready to talk about
my thing. Okay,
your thing.
so again, back to it.
Mhm.
How are we as people that have this statement?
Yeah.
I'm the only one that's growing.
Yep.
How are we actually still part of the problem?
Mhm.
How are we projecting? We think that it's the other person, but how do we have responsibility still?
Yeah.
Because I know I do. I know anytime I feel like I'm the only one who wants to change on this, and it's not just romance, it's the friendships or one-sided relationships anywhere. What could I be? And not always happening, but what could I be doing in that dynamic?
Yeah, so I think this is the really important one, and this is the check for the self. So
Yeah.
we just talked about what the context might be. It might be actually legitimately you are doing like the lion's share of the work and they're not. It could be that you're projecting some stuff onto them, right? And that you're trying to make them take responsibility for things that are actually your responsibility. So it could be, it could be totally valid, but it could be also kind of dicey. We talked about reasons why your partner might be reluctant to enter into all these things that you think will be so great for the relationship to grow and change and be better. It's like there might be some things that might make them put the brakes on or not think that's a great idea. But now we're going to talk about what might be going on for the person making the claim that actually isn't as intellectually honest, whether we're aware of it or not. So I think this is maybe the most important check, right? To like make sure that this is not what's going on underneath everything for you. Because here's the problem. If you are making these statements to your partner, I'm doing all the, I really want to grow together. I really want to, do personal growth work. I really want to like grow the relationship and change it. And I think we need to do all these things. And your intent is not aligned with your words. If your words sound good, they're flowery, they communicate all of this like, all of this positive intent, but there's some stuff you're smuggling in there. Whether your partner has language for it or not, they're going to feel it and read it. They're going to read this, whatever you're smuggling in, and that's going to take all the focus. And so in some ways, when we make these kinds of statements and we send these messages and signals to the person we're in a relationship with, we have to make sure that it's a clean signal. We have to make sure that we are doing our best to be as aligned with that message as possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's like we can't carry, if there's any icky in the signal, that's what the partner is going to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's going to be loud.
Well, we're talking about the concept of congruence.
Right.
Right. And I think humans, when you understand this, it's a very powerful concept. Most people don't have congruence with how they are and what they say. There's incongruence there. Most people are kind of living a double reality at all times. Like I'm behaving one way, but I'm saying these things over here. And certainly if we have to like signal to others our goodness or our attunement to society, we have to be very duplicitous, right? We have to kind of pretend something maybe at work or something else of who we are, persona work. We talk about this because we have a different value set maybe than what the world expects. And so we start to kind of have a bifurcation there. And we're incongruent with how we really are versus what we're presenting.
Right.
And that's very obvious to see when we're in our personaed self, like at work and we have our business or work face on and we go home and we're more our real self at home, real self, whatever that means. We're less personaed at home. That's easy to see the bifurcation. But when you're in a relationship with somebody, it's very subtle because you may not even be aware of the incongruence.
Yes.
That's the key.
Yeah.
Right. It's like when you like get up on stage to give a talk, the audience can smell your nervousness, even if you're not giving any like obvious signals of it. They can just feel it.
Yeah.
Right. You're almost nervous for the person. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Somebody's giving a talk and you just know they're unsteady and they could mess up and they're just barely hanging on. And you're almost feeling like really uncertain and unnerved by it. It like makes you feel deeply uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And they could be perfect. They could say every word and hit every point perfectly, but you just have this foreboding sense in your gut.
Feel it. Yeah.
Same thing for somebody gets on stage. They mess up their words. They're oh, sorry, I meant to say this. And they're flipping slides around and they didn't get it right. But you can just feel the congruence.
Yeah.
And the consistency. You're like, oh, okay, they mean their message. So your partner can feel the same thing.
Yes.
And maybe it's not nervous. Maybe it's resistance they're coming up with. They're like, something's off.
Yeah.
I hear the words. They're perfect. but I feel the difference in your heart and yourself. The
Yeah.
congruence is off. It doesn't feel congruent with what you're saying, like
Yeah.
the energy itself. And they know you very well. Like they know the deepest, most intimate ways that you show up energetically. Like you guys have been extremely intimate together in a lot of different fashions. So like they are very much tuned to you, most likely. Even if they're not a person that's normally tuned to other people's energy, they're going to be tuned to you because you're their partner.
Yep.
So that congruence piece is very important.
Yes, exactly.
And that's what you're saying. It's like,
yes.
watch for where you're unconsciously even incongruent with yourself.
Yes.
And you're saying this, but come on.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a few things I want to mention that might be going on that you might want to do a little a deeper dig into what your motivations are. Now, you as somebody who uses introverted feeling or authenticity, what you taught me is that motivations are always a cocktail. There's always multiple motivations running. So it's not like anytime we do anything, you're going to have 100% pure motivation. Like it just doesn't exist. But if you are unaware of one of the things I'm about to mention, and so you're not acknowledging or owning it, that it's a part of it, then it's actually going to be a louder signal. It's going to feel sneaky. And so just being aware of it and going like, yeah, this is a part of it for me, but that doesn't mean that the other motivations, which are more pure, more honest, more intellectually and emotionally honest, it doesn't mean that those aren't also true.
Yeah.
So just make sure that if any of these are hitting for you, that that you own them, right? That you recognize that they're part of why you're making these statements to your partner.
Yeah.
Okay. The first one is avoiding specific conflict. So as opposed to just directly talking about an issue, like directly engaging with it, you might want to get involved in personality type or get involved in personal development, because you're hoping that by focusing on these things that'll help a person grow, you won't have to mention these conflicts, right? Or something that's like a really difficult topic to bring up.
So grow the forest and we don't have to cut down the one sick tree.
Right.
Because we have a healthy forest. Look how healthy the whole forest is.
That's right.
What does it matter if we have one sick tree?
That's right.
Like we don't need to cut that down now or even address it.
Yep.
And you're saying it's a bypass. It's
Yes.
like if I can just get a whole healthy forest surrounding the sick tree of the relationship, then we don't have to address that.
That's right. So it'll just somehow this unresolved issue will just resolve itself if we can focus on generalized growth and development. So if there is something that is a conflict that you're avoiding and hoping that doing growth and development or getting into personality types will help you address, that's going to be obvious. Not that it's obvious you're avoiding conflicts. It's going to be obvious that you're avoiding something. So it won't feel like an honest ask. It won't feel like you're going, we should be doing this thing because it's good for us, because they're going to feel you're actually avoiding something that is the real thing that would be good for you as a couple. The second one is a need for control. So one might suggest, you kind of mentioned it before, that it could be a power play. And in that dynamic, it might have been like, I'm the person who suggested this thing, and so it puts control in my hands or whatever. But I think the need for control could also be controlling the direction the relationship is going. So if getting into type or getting into growth is actually you trying to curate the relationship in a very specific way, that underlying motivation, that need to direct, kind of forge the direction of the relationship, I think that's going to feel pretty obvious too, even in a subterranean way.
I think one of the best places to see this is in religious frameworks. Sometimes partners want to get really serious about a religion they both grew up in because it gives the partner more, like the religion itself gives a framework that puts them in a better position of power. Right? Because that's the framework of the religion. So by getting closer to God in this religious framework, I get more power.
Yeah.
And who's going to call me on that?
Right.
I'm getting closer to God. I'm bringing our family closer to God. I'm bringing us as a couple closer to God and whatever faith background you have.
Yeah.
And it's unconscious because you know that framework gives you more power, dominance, ability.
Yep.
And so that's what the kind of thing you're talking about. It's like those little insidious ways that you take over through the guise of growth, whatever that means. This isn't a religious framework, but it can also happen in personal growth directly.
Absolutely. In a very similar way, actually. In a very similar way. Another one is seeking validation, right? Like you might want to actually just be acknowledged and validated for how hard you're working. but you're kind of pestering the other person, right? To grow in a similar way. So it might actually just be that that you feel unrecognized, and you're hoping that personal development will be the way that they'll open their eyes and suddenly appreciate you. And so it's actually not so much a desire for them, for you to grow as a couple, but for them to grow up enough to validate you.
To go, oh, this was hard.
Yes.
I just did it myself.
Yep.
Thank you for growing, Antonia.
Mhm.
Now that I've done some of my own, I'm recognizing it in you. I'm giving you feedback now and saying, yeah, that was really good. Oh, man. That's kind of the secret desire we have.
Yes, exactly.
For the partner to grow in that channel, potentially.
No, I'm not saying, by the way, that one's not necessarily a bad intent. It's just not as honest of an intent as I would like us to grow together, right? Yeah. It's like, actually, I want you to grow so that you can tell me how awesome I am because I've been growing. So it's a completely understandable motivation. And again, it's not like you have to get rid of any of these. You just have to kind of own them and acknowledge them. And once you own and acknowledge these secondary motivations, they sort of lose their power of corruption. Like you just kind of go, okay, that's a part of it too. Another one might be fear of abandonment, hoping that if you grow together, the person won't leave you. You might have like attachment issues or be anxiously attached and hope that growth will be the thing that binds you together more. Again, it's not necessarily a negative motivation or intention. It's just one that isn't as honest as I just want us to grow as a couple, right? And so just owning it and acknowledging it. And I think one of the big ones is, and I think that this might be quite common, is having unmet expectations. And by that, I mean, you imagined a relationship would be a certain way. You had these dreams or ambitions and desires, and you partnered up, and you just kind of thought that your partner would fulfill whatever these expectations were for what partnership means. And then they don't. Right? There's some unmet expectation. Maybe there's one or two things. Maybe there's a lot of things. And you haven't reevaluated those expectations. You just know you're disappointed. And you're hoping growing, right? You're hoping their personal development or they're figuring more out about themselves, or maybe growing as a couple will now make it so that you can meet them, right? That you'll get your unmet expectations.
I think in that same vein, a lot of people buy on discount, meaning they think to themselves, this person I'm ready to partner with they're not at the level they probably need to be in a pure way. It's okay though. It's that song from what was that, Frozen? That's the dumbest song in the movie Frozen. I cannot stand, but it's he's a fixer upper.
Oh
right?
yeah.
It's kind of this idea like, well, my mom jokes about it, but she's like, yeah, when I met your dad, he didn't know really how to dress well, but I figured I can fix that in post. Like I can work on dressing him better and having him more style. Like that's not a concern. Like hers wasn't about, like deeper things, but just about his dress and appearance.
Yeah.
And she's like, I can handle that. I'll fix this one. I think we do in a relationship like that sometimes if we're insecure ourselves and we don't think we deserve a partner that's better for us. Mm-hmm. We're like, well, I'll just take what I can get and I'll just improve them. Yeah. That's how I'll do it. I'll fix it over time.
Ooh.
And I think that's probably where too, like the starting point was tough.
Yes.
Right? It's like now these expectations they're even higher than what they would have been had we been peers.
What a phrase you just used. Buy on discount.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It's another way of saying we partner up with a project.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I got a project. So come on, project, let's catch up.
Yeah. It's almost like that was the purpose. Like I was going to help you, like the expectation you had, they didn't know it, but you had plans for their life. Mm-hmm. And you're going to get them to a place where you're going to be peers. You're going to be great together. This can work.
Right.
I've seen men and women do this. I mean, everybody does this.
Yeah.
Not everybody does this.
Right.
All types do this.
Right.
Of people do this.
Anybody can do this.
Anybody can do this. And I think that's also a very big factor in when you're in this zone. You might be, everything after that point might be completely congruent and like you're not resonating with anything Antonia just mentioned, but the premise is off because you bought a discount, right? And so fundamentally, the assumption is very challenging.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and quite honestly, especially if it's one of our first really long-term relationships, it might take a minute to realize that the expectations of a relationship versus the reality of one, like there's a lot of discrepancies that need to be reconciled. And it's just the difference between having an experience of something versus having an ideal of something. And so one thing we might want to do is reevaluate whether or not the expectations we had were realistic to begin with. And that no amount of growth and development that our partner can do will be able to live up to a fantasy.
Yeah.
And so how much of my expectation of my partner is fantastic, and what am I really asking of them? And so having a little bit of reevaluation of what did I bring into the relationship that is actually it's unrealistic and unkind. It's burdensome to my partner to ask for, right? As opposed to completely valid. And we each have, we each are supposed to come into the relationship independent, create interdependence, grow together. There's lots of different ways that this can be modeled. But am I actually adding further burden by having them meet something that was never really something that could be met to begin with? So I think that that's a really important one to reevaluate too.
Yeah.
So,
Tony, did you buy on discount?
I bought on discount. Yeah, that's right.
I knew it. I knew you were going to say that.
That's right. It was like, what was it? As is.
No returns.
No, it was actually.
It ended in zeros. There was no 99 cents at the end. It was.
You were not as is. You were like new.
Well, I think some of the corners were a little bent and
a little
dinged
bit
up.
Yeah.
There's some dents.
I feel like I got a deal.
Gently used.
Gently used.
That's what you bought. You bought me gently used. I think.
Yeah.
It was discount. Yeah, it was discount.
I was like, I'm not gonna use this guy gently.
I'm not paying full price. The gently used.